All right, welcome everyone to another episode of A Gamer's Opinion here on Gotta Be Legend TV, GBL TV. This is Aliens, of course. I want to wish everyone a happy new year, right? Of course, today is January the 6th. It happens to be my birthday. So I want to go ahead and put this video together and put it out to everyone asking this question. Are these games really next generation games? Now, of course, next generation or what we assume to be the next generation of consoles, right? Launched in 2020, right? Right now we're heading into the third year. We do know when they released that, we were going through a pandemic at that time. So, a lot of things were on pause. Consoles, in particular, the PlayStation 5 was a little difficult to, obtain. Some games may have been delayed due to the fact that a lot of people were working from home. Some games had a lot of bugs because of that factor. And overall, right, the whole industry, the whole planet really was affected by this pandemic. However you feel about it is really not the point here. But I did want to talk about what has happened since then, right? We're heading into the third year of this generation. And the question asks itself, right, are these games really next generation games? Some people may feel that they are because they're on new consoles. Some people may feel that they aren't because they're just, you know, higher scaled versions of a previous generation, right? For example, or a title that could run on a previous generation. There are some games that are on PS5, for example, and Series X that are also able to run on inferior hardware. Now, you can say, these games can run on a Series S or a PlayStation 4 Pro or even a base PS4 like God of War Ragnarok. So, I think it's important that we discuss this and at least try to identify if these games are next generation games or not. Now, I bring this up because I've had some discussions with a lot of people, in particular, the Broadband Bullies Discord server. Shout out to the Broadband Bullies. Shout out to my friend NextGen720. Hope he's doing better. And, we've discussed this, right? How some games on PC that are multiplats can run on inferior hardware. And we're going to take a look at some upcoming games that appear to be able to run on inferior hardware, but may not be available next gen. Previous gen, right? And some that perhaps could have been, but won't be. So we're going to take a look at a few games here, and then we're going to look at some details, right? The different websites explaining what can be the equivalent to a PS5, for example. So we're going to go ahead and open Steam. As you see here, this is my wish list. And we're going to take a look at Dead Space, right? Dead Space is a game that's coming out in a few weeks, right? It's the 27th that it comes out. So it comes out in approximately 3 weeks. As a matter of fact, 3 weeks. So we're going to open Dead Space. We're going to take a look. And we're going to scroll down to the system requirements. So we see here that the minimum requirements are either an AMD RX 5700, right as you see here, and a GTX 1070. That's pretty old, actually. I used to have a 1070 7 years ago, and that card must have came out about 7 or 8 years ago. The recommended specs, of course, RX 6700 XT and an RTX 2070. So we ask ourselves, would this game be able to run, say, on the PS4 Pro? Or perhaps an Xbox One X? Something that needs to be thought, right? I mean, if we're talking about games that are considered next gen only, or games that are trending towards that shift right? Because we've been dealing with cross-gen games for about 2 years. That shift needs to occur, or it needs to occur soon, because we've been told that these consoles, right, are next generation consoles, but are the games next generation? Are they really next generation? What constitutes a next generation game? Is it resolution? Is it frames per second? Is it ray tracing and 60 frames per second? Is it ultra settings on PC with 120 frames per second? So the equivalent of ultra resolution or ultra graphics on a PC over on a console, right? So the equivalent of that at 120 frames. What really constitutes a next generation game? We've been told what constitutes next generation hardware because the consoles are out and they've been out for 2 years. But remember, in this day and time, that's already old hardware. So we need to ask ourselves, what is next generation? What constitutes next generation? What does it mean? Is it the way the game plays? Is it innovation in the way you experience the game? Is it the dual sense? What is next generation? Because we've been told that next generation is here, but are these games next generation? So that's the first example right there. Let's go on to the next one. Another game that's looking to release in March in particular, Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4, look at this. An RX 560 or a GTX 1050 Ti. That's the minimum. The recommended is an RX 5700 and a GTX 1070. But hold on, wasn't that just the minimum for Dead Space? So are you telling me that this game can run perhaps even on a base PS4? What can run this game then? Look at over here. Estimated performance when set to prioritize performance 1080p 60 frames. Frame rate might drop in graphics intensive scenes. 2060 required to support ray tracing. That's if you want to play with ray tracing on. Some people think it's a novelty. Some people think it is next generation. It definitely does have an impact in the presentation of the game. Make no mistake about it. But is it something that some people or most people that play on consoles find it to be like a selling point? From what I've seen, no. Definitely on PC. But console, I feel as though the people I've interacted with, it's not really much of a selling point. It's more, maybe like an added bonus. It's a novelty. That's interesting though, right? Could run on a 1050 Ti. We're going to look up when that card came out. That card had to have come out maybe at least, if I had a 1070 7 years ago, 1050 must have came out about 8 or 9 years ago, but we're going to check. So those are the minimum and recommended system requirements for the upcoming Resident Evil 4 remake. Pretty interesting, huh? Next up, we're going to look at Street Fighter 6. Now, Street Fighter 6 can run on a 1060 and an RX 580. But the recommended 2070 or an RX 5700 XT. Are you seeing a pattern here? Are you noticing something? Are these games really next generation games? What constitutes next generation? Is it load times with the SSDs found in these next generation consoles? or on these PCs where, most people, may have an NVMe SSD. For example, the PS5 has the ability to have an NVMe SSD, 7,000 read write speeds. Is that what makes it next generation? What makes games next generation? Are we really playing next generation games, folks? I don't know. It's kind of sketchy. Kind of sketchy, honestly. Now, one game that I'm really, really looking forward to seeing the PC system requirements for is this. The Last of Us Part 1. It's not out yet, as you can see, to be determined. But I find it very interesting that this game is going to be made available on PC. When the game came out on PS5, it was marketed as built from the ground up for the PS5. So, if that's the case, then it should be able to have a minimum requirement, at least, in my opinion, if it's really built from the ground up for the PS5, making it, quote unquote, a true next generation game, even if it's a remake. It should use a minimum of at least a 2070, perhaps, or maybe a 2060 Super. We're going to look it up. We actually have the details here. Because if it's not, if it says that it could run on a 1050 Ti, 1060, or 1070, then was it really built for the ground up for the PS5? Or was it just a marketing ploy from Sony to get people to have a PS5 to buy this game again? Or perhaps for people that are interested in buying a PS5 and fanatics of this game, because let's not get it confused. The Last of Us has a big fan base, and it has a lot of fanatics. Not just fans, fanatics. Right? Some people, they put their blinders on when they see The Last of Us, and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Don't get me wrong. The game was good. Absolutely. The original. And I can see why people were excited for a remake, because yes, it was definitely captivating. But, biases aside, it's the third time the game was released in 9 years. Right? And from what we understand, it looks like Sony is interested in doing some sort of remake for Horizon, right? Which is a game that came out a few years back, just last generation. But like I said, the question here, was this game really built from the ground up for the PS5, be marketed as a next-gen only title or a next-gen only game? We'll see. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Of course, there may be people that may get upset or think that I'm trolling. I'm asking a question. Is this a next-gen game? What is a next-gen game then? If you're telling me that this game was built from the ground up for the PS5, which by definition is, or at that time was being marketed as a next generation console. Right now it's a current generation console, but it was marketed as a next generation console. Then if it's built for a next generation system only, because it only came out on the PS5, then by definition it should be a next generation game and only run on the equivalent of what a next generation console can build, is built upon, its framework. We'll see. We'll definitely see. I think that these requirements, this game's supposed to come out, as you see here, March 3rd, probably a month from now. By first, second week of February, that information should be available, so we'll know. So let's get to what I wanted to show everyone. So, as you see on the screen, these are different video cards that came out within the last 4 or 5 years approximately. As you see here, number 7, right? Number 7 is the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060 Super. As you see in the final sentence here, it says that this is one GPU that falters when compared directly to the PS5, as it does not have enough teraflops to match the PS5's GPU, but that does not make it an awful option. The 2070. Moving on to the RTX 2070, you are now getting more and more closer to the performance numbers that you can find that are equivalent to the ones that are found on the PlayStation 5. Thanks to both GPUs having much similar performance numbers overall, you are not getting anything that should come as a shock to you. If you generally want something that delivers good performance overall, RTX 2070 can get you performance close to a PS5. And now we have the RTX 2080. Although the RTX 2080 is undoubtedly one of the best GPUs that you could pick up from the market, it is old and not as good as when it comes to performance in ray tracing and DLSS. It might be able to deliver solid performance even today, and the best thing is that it still comes with more teraflops than the GPU that you find in the PS5. So a PS5 is essentially in between the 2070 and the 2080, right? How many games did we see just now that require the 2070? This one here, we still don't know. It's still to be determined. Let's go back to Dead Space. Dead Space 2070, recommended, but it can run on older hardware. Resident Evil 4 definitely does not require just a 2070. It could run on a 1070. But if you want ray tracing, yeah, you're going to need a 2070 at minimum. See where I'm going? Street Fighter 6. Recommended 2070. But can run on a 1060. Are these games really next generation? Let's continue. So, as we see here, what is a PS5 GPU equivalent? So, in terms of performance, the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070 is the closest GPU equivalent to the PS5. Although AMD GPUs like the Radeon RX 5700 XT more closely resemble the architecture of the PS5 Oberon GPU, the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070 more closely matches the performance and benchmark. So, if you ask me, my opinion, for a game to be considered next gen, then the minimum specs for that game should be a 2070. Not the recommended. Should be the minimum. If we're talking about games that are considered next gen because they are built for these consoles, then it should translate the same to PC. Because if you're on a PC and you can run it on an older GPU, then are you having you could say you're having a next gen experience because it's got higher resolution frames, but I could probably get 60 frames running it at 1080. Yeah, you can say, well, hey, but it's not, 4K or it's not quad HD, but the minimums, right? Minimums say it's not. It's not next gen. I don't know. It's just a thought, just a question. And you see here, right? What GPU is equivalent to the PS4 Pro? Check this out. Standard PS4 is similar to the old GTX 750 Ti. PS4 Pro, higher than a GTX 1050, but lower than a GTX 1060. Games can definitely be optimized to run on a PS4 Pro if they wanted to. But of course, why would they want to do that? They want to sell you the hardware. Makes no sense, right? So it kind of forces your hand to, invest in one of those machines if you own a PS4 Pro. But, in all actuality, with proper optimization, the game could run on there, right? I mean, God of War Ragnarok ran on there. Are you telling me that The Last of Us 1 Remake couldn't run on a PS4 Pro? Even perhaps on a base PS4 if God of War Ragnarok could? Ask yourself. Could it? I think so. But of course, it didn't make sense for Sony to do that because they would have then sold the same game on the same console twice, right? PS4, when it came out that same year, or within the year, as a matter of fact, within the year, a year later, 2014, you got the remastered version of The Last of Us, right? Now imagine if at the end of the PS4 cycle, or close to the end, they happen to give you the same game again, just remade, right? With the Last of Us 2 engine, which was an engine that was designed to run on the PS4. It would have been a bad look, right? I mean, it would have been Sony selling you the same game twice, right? Could they have gotten some sort of class action lawsuit for that? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. Just asking the question. But if you tell people it's built from the ground up for the PS5 and make it only on the PS5, or at least available only on the PS5, then you save yourself that trouble. But what happens when the game comes out on PC? Is the cat going to be out of the bag? We'll see. We'll have to see how people react. So here we have someone that built a PS4 Pro, or a PC rather, with the specs. This is from GameSpot. So what did they say? They said that they used an RX 4080. RX 4080, right? Let's see. 4080, folks. Resident Evil 4. On a 560. It's teetering, but remember, the other guy said on the Reddit, or as a matter of fact, on the forum post, I believe it was Tom's Hardware, 1050 Ti. It could work. Dead Space. RX 5700 1070. It could be optimized to run. And then Street Fighter 580 1060. It could be optimized to run for sure. 60 frames. Right? Just throwing ideas out there. I'm not trying to say that I'm right or I'm wrong. Just asking the question, for everyone else to decide, for everyone else to come and, give their opinion. As we see here. The RX 4080 and the RX 580 is AMD's best mid-range GPU. Right? The 1060 is NVIDIA's equivalent. You see that? The GTX 1060 is the equivalent to that card. The RX 480, RX 580, and the GTX 1060 are currently the cards affected the most by the mining craze. Okay. This was a few years ago. But it's the closest. Right? It even says it here. Slightly slower than the GTX 1060. Which made the RX 580 perform slightly slower. 1060, right? Let's look again. $1050 Ti. 1070, you can make it work. $1060. What do you think? Interesting, right? What's really happening in gaming? Are these games really next generation? We need to ask ourselves that. Then, as you see here, of course, our verdict for outright performance, the 1080 and the 1070 come out on top. However, if you're on a budget, the GTX 1060 and the RX 480 are both considerably cheaper and can easily handle the latest games at 1080p, even stretching 2K in some games. Right? Like I said, I just wanted to ask the question, see what the viewers thought, see what other gamers thought. Are these games really next generation games? If you ask me, my opinion, of course, because this is a gamer's opinion, Gotta Be Legend. This is Aliens, of course. Not quite. Not necessarily. If we're talking about the hardware it's designed to run on, not really. But if that's the case, then what constitutes a next generation game? Is it because it can run only on next generation or quote unquote next generation hardware? But, we have, some data showing that it could run on previous generation hardware. I'm really looking forward to seeing The Last of Us 1 remake, what the specifications will be on PC. I think that's really going to determine whether these games really are next generation games or not, because like I said, the game was marketed as built from the ground up for the PlayStation 5. We already saw that 2070 RTX 2070 is the equivalent to a PlayStation 5. Now, I do expect that to at least be the recommended specifications, right, for Last of Us 1 remake on PC. But I'm interested in seeing what the minimums are. If the minimum is, say, a 1080, okay. But if it's a 1060 or a 1070, it could have easily been optimized to run on a PS4 Pro and then essentially on a PlayStation 4, base PlayStation 4, because, as we said before, the game was designed to run, or at least the engine it used was designed to run on that hardware. But Sony decided to market the game as PS5 only. Like I said, is it because they don't want to get caught selling the same game twice on the same hardware? I don't know. You guys let me know. But this has just been my overview, or at least my opinion, on these next generation games. What are these companies really doing? Are they just, hitting us with, sketchy marketing? Probably. It wouldn't surprise me, right? These companies are sketchy anyway, for the most part. They're out there to get your money by any means. And if you're willing to let them, they'll take it. And you can't fault them. They're in the business of making money. So we'll have to see. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. This has been Aliens for Gotta Be Legend TV. This has been a gamer's opinion. Have a happy 2023, everyone. Peace.